All right. My guest today will be Wu Huangbo, the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, who will be here to brief you on the upcoming high-level political forum on sustainable development. The Secretary General is on his way back to New York and should be arriving next hour or so. Yesterday, as you will have seen, he held separate meetings with the President, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and the Speaker of Parliament of Ukraine. He also had discussions with people who had been displaced by the conflict in Ukraine. Speaking to the press along with President Petro Poroshenko, the Secretary General highlighted his strong emotional ties to the Ukrainian people. He said that he deeply felt the suffering of those who have been displaced and stressed his commitment to address their plight. On Saturday, he wrapped up his participation at the G20 in Hamburg, Germany. In the morning, he attended an event to promote women's entrepreneurship hosted by the White House and the World Bank, followed by G20, a working session on partnership with Africa, migration, and health. The Secretary General also met with President Moon Jae-in of the Republic of Korea and took part on a lunch on digitalization, women's empowerment, and women's empowerment. We issued a statement a bit earlier today on the recovery of Mosul, in which to underscore that the recovery of Mosul is a significant step in the fight against terrorism and violent extremism. The Secretary General paid tribute to the people and the government of Iraq for their courage, determination, and perseverance. He also expressed his sincere condolences for the loss of lives and wished a speedy recovery to all those injured. The United Nations will stand by the government of Iraq in the tasks ahead of creating the necessary conditions for the voluntary, safe, and dignified return of displaced communities, restoring the rule of law, freed up areas, and preventing a return of violence and fostering accountability for all violations committed. And our colleagues on the ground tell us that, while there have been an end to the military conflict, there's still no end in sight to the humanitarian crisis. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, will continue to play a key role in assisting displaced Iraqis for long as necessary. Hundreds of thousands of people have now been displaced. Many have lost relatives, their homes, and have been injured. It's likely that many thousands of people may have to remain in displacement for months to come. More detail on UNHCR's briefing notes. And humanitarian workers also report that 54 residential neighborhoods in western Mosul, of the 54, residential neighborhoods in western Mosul, 15 are heavily damaged and at least 23 are moderately damaged. Humanitarians are also concerned for civilians who are trapped in the areas where fighting is likely to occur, including Tel Afar, Hawija, and western Anbar. And the latest rounds of talks among the Syrian parties began today in Geneva. Speaking to the press a short while ago, Stéphane de Mistura, the special envoy, noted that we are witnessing a phase of simplification of one of the most complex conflicts of our time. He highlighted a pragmatic approach to institutional engineering and the need for incremental process. His remarks are available on the webcast, and the transcript will be done shortly. And we issued a statement earlier today on Syria in which the Secretary General welcomed the announcement by the government of Jordan, Russia, and the United States of a de-escalation zone and arrangements to support a ceasefire and delivery of humanitarian assistance in southwest Syria. This is a significant step towards reducing violence and increasing humanitarian access across the country, in line with the pursuit of goal of a comprehensive nationwide ceasefire as endorsed by multiple Security Council resolutions. Notwithstanding this positive development, the Secretary General urges all countries to preserve the rights of all Syrians to seek asylum and enjoy refugee protection, and until conditions are conducive for return in safety and dignity. As the UN reconvenes the intra-Syrian talks on a political settlement based on Security Council Resolution 2254, the Secretary General urged all parties to redouble their efforts to find a political solution to the Syrian conflict. And our colleagues at the UN mission in South Sudan report that peacekeepers on Saturday prevented the abduction of internally displaced people by 2 armed individuals wearing uniforms of the Sudan People's Liberation Army outside of the protection of civilians site in BENTIU in Unity State. A Mongolian quick reaction force was deployed to the scene when the UN mission first noticed the soldiers harassing civilians. The troops fired warning shots over the heads of the soldiers, who were also behaving aggressively towards peacekeepers, including firing at them. The soldiers fled to the bush. No casualties were reported. The UN mission has reported the incident to the SPLA leadership in the region, who assured the mission that they were investigating the issue. And back here, the Security Council adopted a resolution to establish a political mission in Colombia called the UN Verification Mission for an initial period of 12 months, headed by a special representative of the Secretary General. That mission will begin its activities on September 26 this year. According to the resolution, the verification mission shall verify the implementation of the government of Colombia and the FARC-EP of different parts of the final agreement, including the process of political, economic, social reincorporation of FARC-EP and the implementation of personal and collective security guarantees, as well as comprehensive programs on security and protection measures for communities and organizations of territories. And yesterday in Somalia, the special representative of the Secretary General in that country, Michael Keating, welcomed the opening of the second session of the Somali Parliament. He congratulated the speakers and parliamentarians and stressed they could make significant progress by passing key legislation, including the electoral law, legislation enabling a constitutional review, and a revenue-generating laws. Mr. Keating added that real sovereignty for Somalia depends on the country reducing its dependency upon others and its ability to raise revenues and shape its own agenda. And our humanitarian colleagues inform us that the unprecedented cholera outbreak in Yemen has now surged past 300,000 suspected cases, with over 1,700 associated deaths in just 75 days. Cholera is present in 92% of Yemen's districts, in all governorates except for Socotra Island. Children under the age of 15 account for 40% and 25% of suspected cases and fatalities. People over 60 also represent 30% of the fatalities. And in Afghanistan, the World Food Programme said today will be able to provide food assistance to more than 577,000 people in need, thanks to $20 million received in contributions from the United States. The money will be spent to buy local food, flour, salt, yellow peas, and cooking oil, among other supplies, and will benefit internally displaced people, people affected by natural disasters, and people who struggle to feed their families at certain times of the year. And UNHCR, UNICEF, and the International Rescue Committee today issued a roadmap for action to improve the situation of refugees and migrant children arriving and staying in Europe without their parents and caregivers. More information on UNHCR's website. And tomorrow at 11, there'll be a press conference here on marine biodiversity, sponsored by the Permanent Mission of Belgium. Speakers will include Jose Maria Figueres, the former president of Costa Rica and co-chair of the Global Oceans Commission, Sophie Mirgo, the senior international negotiator for Belgium's Department of Marine Environment, and Ambassador Juan Jose Gomez Camacho of Mexico, as well as Dr. Lucy Woodall of Oxford University. Sir.
Happy Monday. Thanks, Steph. Anything on the
so far.
anything? Let's change that for you.
Yeah.
Anything on the DRC? The head of the Electoral Commission there has said that it's not going to be possible to hold presidential elections before the end of the year. How concerned are you that that is an indication that President Kabila will stay on even longer beyond his term?
We've taken note of the comments made by the president of the Electoral Commission. We trust that the Commission will soon publish an electoral calendar clarifying when exactly the presidential and legislative elections will take place. The head of the Peacekeeping Department, Mr. Lacroix, will be briefing the Council tomorrow, and we'll have more information on this issue, on the focus on the Congolese authorities and the electoral calendar. Yes, sir.
Do we have a number for the displaced persons in near Mosul, or more generally in Iraq, with the UNHCR?
Sure. The number. Let me find it. We've had that number for a while. The latest, as of a couple of weeks ago, I think basically about 862,000 had been displaced. So we can imagine that number is now slightly higher. As we said, we obviously welcome the end of the fighting. The humanitarian crisis continues, and obviously the focus will be on providing humanitarian assistance and rebuilding basic services as quickly as possible in the city, focusing obviously on water and the issue of electricity grid. We've been in touch with Lise Grande's office, the humanitarian coordinator in Iraq, and we're trying to get her to brief you here this week by video conference. Mr. Lee.
Sure. Some other things, but I wanted something else on DRC. There's been a letter by 10 U.S. senators, pretty much bipartisan, about the killings of Michael Sharp and Zeta Catalan. And I wanted to ask you about this sentence in it. They said that they've heard of the UN Board of Inquiry, but they understand, quote, it will not seek to identify perpetrators or what happened to Mr. Sharp's and Ms. Catalan's Congolese interpreter and drivers. So they're asking for a more serious investigation. One, I wanted to know generally just what's the status of that Board of Inquiry given the interest and what happened. And is it true that the Board of Inquiry, as these senators are saying, will not look at all what happened into the UN contracted interpreter and driver?
The BOI is underway. Last I'd heard, we expect it for the end of this month. As we've said, we would effort to make some of its findings public. The BOI was appointed to establish the facts and, if possible, identify the perpetrators around the killings. We'll submit a report with recommendations as to the next step. We're also looking at further options that may be available to us. Obviously, first and foremost, the responsibility lies on the Congolese authorities. We cannot substitute ourselves for a national criminal investigation unless, of course, there is a Security Council mandate. I think I would urge you to wait and see what the findings are, and then we take it next step. My understanding also is that the letter was addressed, from what I saw in the press reports, to Ambassador Haley, sure, not to the Secretary General.
Oh no, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, because it made this. But what I wanted to know is, one, I remember at the time there was some dispute about whether in fact the interpreter of the two experts had also been found dead. Is that your understanding that he has?
I don't have an understanding to that. I think we have to wait for the BOI and see what facts they would have been able to clear up. Nabil, and then Linda.
On de-escalation zones in Syria, is the UN a partner in these agreements, or do you have any role to monitor?
No, my understanding is that we are not a partner. Obviously, as the Secretary General said, we welcome them. We welcome anything that would lessen the violence and also help us improve the humanitarian access, which has been so challenging, to say the least.
And is Mr. de Mistura planning to brief the Council later this week from here or from Geneva?
He is in Geneva, I think, at least he's not moving until the talks finish. From what I remember hearing just a few minutes ago from the press conference, I think they're looking till Friday or Saturday. I think you have to check what he actually said. But he's not going to leave Geneva. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. Again, regarding the talks, I was wondering, is there a list of the participants, primarily, for example, the Syrian participants?
You mean the Syrian talks? We'll put you in touch with our colleagues in Geneva. I don't have that information with me. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Does the United Nations have any comment on the joint press statement by the U.S., the U.K., and France on July 7th, which places them in direct violation of Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which requires them to negotiate the disarmament of nuclear weapons in good faith? They stated, we do not intend to sign, ratify, or ever become a party to the treaty, which was adopted by 122 member states. Does the UN have any reaction to this? And I'm assuming that the treaty, which was just adopted, is considered entirely legitimate and a United Nations.
Well, there's no issue on the legitimacy of of the treaty. It was passed with the needed votes. The Secretary General welcomed the adoption of the treaty as an important step towards building a nuclear-free world. The treaty, my understanding, will be open for signature in September, as the Secretary General is the depository of the treaty, and as I said, we welcome it as an important step towards building a nuclear-free world. We hope that all member states, like as with all UN treaties, we hope that all member states will eventually support the treaty.
The violation of Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation...
I've said what I've had to say. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, there's Nigeria has summoned the representative of Cameroon. They say that up to 97 Nigerians or ethnic Nigerians were killed in Bakassi by Cameroonian forces. Given the UN's role in the Bakassi Peninsula, Green Tree, you haven't seen this one? And I also wanted to ask you on Cameroon, the former UN legal advisor, Mr. Felix Agborbala, has now been moved to solitary confinement. It's all over the press in Cameroon. I want to ask you again, particularly, but not only, because he's a former UN official, now placed in solitary confinement, facing the death penalty for advocacy of autonomy. Is there any action?
I don't have anything on that today, but I will try to get you something.
And I wanted to ask you whether the Secretary General, there's an interview with Louise Arbour on the topic of migration in the Corriere della Sera, and she says she says giving money to the Libyans will only serve to increase the migration flows. Quote, granting funds to the Coast Guard is not the solution. So since she is the special advisor on migration, are these the Secretary General's views?
The Secretary General's view is that we need a comprehensive compact between those countries of origin, those countries of transit, and the countries of destination to manage the flow of people, of migrants, which has been in existence since time immemorial and will continue. It needs to be managed in the best possible way. Thank you. I'll get our guest.